Let's talk industrial marketing. I'm Joseph Lewin with Cadina's Part Solutions, and today's conversation is with Ravi Kyasaram. Ravi is an engineer turned growth strategist who has an extensive background with global companies. Ravi formerly was with Emerson in their cold chain division, working to set them on a path to go from single-digit growth to double-digit growth. Let's dive into the details. Ravi, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Joseph, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really happy to be a part of your interview and speak to you on this opportunity.
Is it possible to break out of single digit growth in a commodity driven market?
It is possible to get out of a single-digit growth market in a commodity-driven environment, and I think it takes a creative approach for us to break the single-digit barrier. And there are great many ways you can do it. You can play around, different parts of the value chain. You can considering solution selling. So the short answer to your question is, if you're in a commodity-driven business, you do not have to be stuck in a single digit growth mindset. You can be creative and you can break the shackles of single digit growth.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your previous role at Emerson and what you did there, because it's really very practical and is right on for our audience that's focused in industrial marketing for components. So it's right on. So maybe you could just tell me a little bit about your background there, and then the cold chain industry specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joseph. So, given what we're going through the pandemic, I couldn't have been grateful to be a part of the cold chain industry, because we played a significant role in at least getting the vaccines to the hospitals. We'll get into those details, but my role, your audience might know, Emerson's 130-year-old industrial conglomerate. So they have a lot of technologies, a lot of components, and solutions that by and large serve a variety of industries. So I was associated with the cold chain industry. And just, I know your audience might know what cold chain industry is, but just to be, clear and level set. So cold chain needs are nothing but the refrigeration needs of the food and the life sciences industry. And these needs are, to kind of simply put it, they are met by a combination of, two underlying solutions or technologies. One is a compressor, which is the engine to keep these refrigerators going, and the second aspect is the controls. Controls are the human machine interface through which we control how cold or how warm, relative sense, what the temperature should be. And
Okay.
as far as the applications of the cold chain industry is concerned, like we talked about it, it's mostly on the food or the life sciences, but you could see cold chain applications either in a stationary mode, which could be in a warehouse, or which could be in a hospital environment, or it could be mobile, which could be both ships, containers, or reefer trucks. And it's needed to mention, as you get into the industrial world and especially the perishable world, cold chain plays a significant role in keeping keeping the contents intact.
Yeah, excellent. And you were working, yeah, like you said, a lot with compressors, correctly. So that's going to be one of the big products that Emerson sells, or components they sell would be specifically compressors, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Emerson's very big on compressors, and over the years, Emerson's made a conscious effort to move up in the value chain by acquiring a lot of controls capabilities.
I
To your
see.
prior question, Joseph, can we break out of single-digit growth? Emerson has done it, and they've done it by not just limiting themselves to compressors, which is the baseline. They've gone up in the value chain, got controls, and now what they do is they have higher wallet of higher share of the wallet for their customers, and that way you can kind of serve more solutions and so on and so forth. Yes, but you're right, the core offering is compressors, and they've been doing it for over 25 years now.
Okay. Yeah. So, what is the current state of the cold chain industry, and how does the same ideas or things that are going on in the cold chain industry apply to other component markets?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, because cold chain industry is not new. and hence it's not sexy. So what it means is, it is fraught with the same challenges as most of the industrials confront every day, which are tighter margins. And given the age of the industry, it's not that you are the only player in the markets. You've got a lot of competitors. And the third element is, because there are so many things set in stone, there is an element of commoditization. It's not it doesn't really have a B2C element in which you or I as consumers are interacting with these technologies. It's mostly behind the scenes. So most of the innovation that you see in the world is around B2C. But this being B2B, there is innovation, but innovations, the pace of innovation is not as quick as what you see in B2C. So there's an element of commoditization that also is challenging the industry.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like in cold chain, but in different industries, there's also a lot of standardization that you have to follow based on, different codes or industry standards, or things like that have to be followed. So sometimes the core product size, dimensions, certain elements, even the configuration of how it's mounted, depending on the component, those are all things that might not be able to change, and so it literally might be a commodity product in certain circumstances where your competitor can make something that is, at least to first glance, something that's almost exactly the same.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You bring in a very important aspect of standardization, and we call it interoperability. So, I mean, you should be able to, swap a competitor compressor and it should just work fine. So that's one limitation. Another thing that, defines the state of the industry is also the regulatory landscape. So you have a lot of, refrigerant regulations that the government comes out with. So that kind of defines the time period, especially in the cold chain industry. So each refrigerant, type has a life of about 4 to 5 years, in which what happens is manufacturers like Emerson and everybody else, you have to gear up, A, come up with a new technology, B, align your manufacturing, C, hit scale, and make sure that your new compressors are out in the entire value chain to the very end, to a McDonald's or to a hospital. And then once you kind of hit scale and serve scale for 2 years, you have to again get started on a new refrigerant, new regulation. So
Wow.
to say, that keeps the industry alive, but also that makes the industry a little more challenging.
Yeah, and the focus then on innovation is more innovating to work around, or not work around, but work with government regulations and industry standards, rather than innovating something that would actually be new or make a huge
True.
change in the industry. It's your engineering focus is on making sure that you don't have some kind of major liability or get fines or whatever from the government. So that definitely makes things more challenging. And I know something we talked about in our pre-conversation was how it's not only whether or not your product actually is a commodity, but part of the challenge is whether your customers view it as a commodity, and that it's essentially positioned as a commodity in the way that people shop for it, if people think it is, whether you actually have some major differentiator or not. And that kind of poses another challenge to be able to show how your products are different if people think of it as a commodity.
Yeah, absolutely right. And one of the biggest elements that we've realized is, you might consider your product to be a commodity, but little thought is actually put into the fact that there is so much data, so to say, that your commodity is capturing. Say a compressor, if you add intelligence to a compressor through a control, you're able to articulate how often is the compressor getting used,
Hmm.
and at what times of the day is it getting used for long, for the longest. So there's so much intelligence that a commodity product can offer, provided you have the right metrics, and you have the right strategy in place to capture the data that your commodity, so to say, components are capturing from their application.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's something that I've talked to other people about in the past. Is with commodity parts, when you don't have something that you can do that's completely brand new, sometimes the data, either that you provide with that part up front to give actionable upfront intelligence, or the data that can be gathered and that they can collect after the fact, whether that's through sensors on the parts or connecting to another solution that you might have, which we could talk about in a minute. But those things become potentially more valuable than the part itself, and it could help you either differentiate yourself in the market purely because of the data, or on the flip side, charge more for your product and charge a premium, even if the component itself is identical to a competitor, if you're able to provide data or collect data.
Absolutely right, and we can get into the other details as we talk through them. But one of the things that comes to my mind is jobs to be done, right? So if you perceive your product to be a commodity or a component, then the job that your product does is, oh, it only keeps things cold. But if you add an element of intelligence, if you make it a solution, then probably the job it does is it informs the user on its health. Then it's doing way more than just keeping things cold. It's also letting the user know, hey, I'm performing well, my health is good, you don't need to be worried about it. But if something were to come up, and if the component, so to say, alerts the user would be able to make alternative arrangements or get some preventive maintenance, in which case they might not lose thousands and thousands of dollars worth of inventory. So
Yeah, that's
I think
excellent.
my earnest request to all your subscribers and readers and viewers is that don't limit the role of the products you sell by the designation it gets. If you think that it is recognized or identified as a commodity, you have the opportunity to change its designation. You can rechristen it, and you can come up with a new identity for your products.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really the way you have to think when you're in a commodity market. And the exciting part about that is that most of your competitors are probably not doing that, at least not
Correct.
to the degree that is possible. And so if you get creative, I mean, in the business to consumer market, it's much more challenging to come up with creative or to get an idea. I mean, you really have to think outside the box and even grow an audience and all of these different things that are really challenging. Whereas in the B2B space, using a little bit of creativity can really set you apart big time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that comes to mind, Joseph, is uh, you know going back to what you've just said in the B2C environment. It's also really tough to acquire customers. It's not easy because there's so many players who are trying to get the same market share. But the beauty of being a commodity or a component supplier is you're already operating on a heavy base. Your products are at scale. There are a lot of customers. They are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. So the amount of effort that you would probably have to make to kind of upgrade your components into solutions would be a lot lesser than the amount of effort someone who comes into the market trying to sell solutions has to make. So long story short, you obviously all see the excitement. I would quite dislike for anyone to be frustrated or disappointed that you're in the world of selling commodities or selling components. There is a lot of potential and there's a lot of growth, provided you make the small adjustments, like you said, Joseph.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away too much about the second part of our conversation because we were kind of getting into it, and I have a thought on that as far as the jobs to be done. So I want to come back to that after you explain a little bit more. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about the challenge that Emerson brought you in to solve, and what was going in their specific business, selling compressors and the controls and in the cold chain division.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been it was a fantastic challenge, especially for someone who believes in problem solving. So one of the biggest challenges that Emerson had was growth stagnation. It was a business that was growing only at about 2.5 to 3% on an annual basis, and it was concerning because when you see the quick serve industry, I wouldn't say that the industry was growing at a great pace, but then there were pockets of growth. There were a few chains that were growing really quickly. Say something like a Chick-fil-A would be rapid, fast growth. So that was one challenge, which is top line growth. The second challenge was we were the intel inside, but nobody knew about us. So if you map the presence of Emerson products across a restaurant, you can pinpoint probably 7 out of 10 pieces of equipment in the kitchen where Emerson had some role to play, but nobody knew about it because our customers were more known to the end user because they were the brand. So we did not really have a presence there, and not that having a presence really matters because there's a lot you can accomplish by being behind the scenes. But if you have an interesting solution, it becomes challenging because you almost have to go in cold because they don't know who you are. On the
Yeah.
contrary, if the end customers know who you are, then it gets easy. And the third element is there was also need for differentiation. How do we differentiate us from a lot of other, say, controls manufacturers? So what's really unique about Emerson? So we had a lot of different products, solutions that could come together and build a solution, but
Mm.
we couldn't do or say any of these things when I was roped into lead growth strategy.
Yeah. So essentially, your products were being spec'd in by an OEM, refrigerator brand. And so there's an Emerson compressor inside of a different company's refrigerator. And so then on the floor at McDonald's, for instance, nobody would have any idea that there was an Emerson compressor in there. They know the brand of the refrigerator, and the challenge there is that makes even more of a commodity part because the manufacturer of the refrigerator, that brand could go choose a different compressor that's similar, and they might be doing that based off of price or availability or the things that people are typically used to marketing using. And if you don't meet pricing or availability, they could just go with somebody else, and the end user would have no idea that you were gone. And so it kind of makes you a commodity part and disposable in a sense if the end user has no idea that you exist.
Spot on. Couldn't agree more with you. So at least the good news for Emerson was, it was a company which was around the block for a long time. So there was that sense of channel presence, distributor presence, and
Mm.
just the magnitude of the operations never really made the company vulnerable. So, but what did really happen was you were not in control of your growth. Like you said, you were always, responding to the responding to the responding to the fact that someone's specifying you versus you're up there and you're trying to win orders or you're trying to get more share of the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it kind of like you're saying, those other pieces are important. Talking about distributors and your sales channels and your pricing and availability, and all those are things are important, but those are kind of like table stakes. So if you don't have those, you're going to be going down. But having those things alone, it's hard to hit the double digit growth. You're going to maybe be able to hit 2, 3, 4, 5% growth, but to hit double digit growth, you kind of have to start thinking outside the box. So, what did you do to determine your course of action? Like, what was the first steps that you took to figure out how to solve that problem and differentiate your products?
So I think one of the first things that I wanted to figure out was, what does it feel to be a user? What are some of the pain points that our users, so to say, we're in the world of selling components or solutions which are not very which more or less fall into the world of components, and we are behind the scenes people. So that was my biggest aspiration. I did not want to ask around people because that answer did not exist. So what
Mm.
I did was I found an opportunity to go and work at a McDonald's restaurant, and we were already talking to McDonald's about a bunch of solutions, much like most of the competitors would talk. And I was really keen. Okay, how about I go work a shift at McDonald's for 3 weeks, where I would not tell anyone who I am, and park my car, probably a mile away, and just walk to the restaurant, and just just be a part of the ecosystem. That way,
Mm.
I also learned how the quick serve restaurants work and had first-hand experience of life there, and I also had first-hand experience of how our products play a role. So that was the most important thing that I did. Another thing that I did was I had also taken a clinical approach of our P&L analysis. So over the years, I've looked at 3-year CAGRs of each of our top customer. So who have we supplied, how many components, and what were the sales, what were the margins, and what was the trend. So, and typically I use just basic principles. If you have a customer who's growing, the customer cannot suddenly degrow for the lack. You would see that trend line being extended. So whenever you see that shift, you should that kind of made me wonder, oh, what's happening, why should
Mm.
I why are we losing on this account, and so on and so forth. But just to bring the emphasis back, one of the things that we never do in the component or the on in our world is pursue that customer intimacy, and doing that really opened a lot of floodgates of ideas and opportunities for me when I was tackling this challenge.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love that you went on site and worked at McDonald's. That's awesome. Because a lot of people talk about customer research and how it's important, but you know, I feel like there's a lot of lip service that's done to customer research, and then maybe that's talking to an executive at McDonald's and saying, "Hey, what challenges are you facing?" And they go, they tell you whatever it is from their perspective, but to go to the actual source, and be looking for what are the pain points that people in the restaurant are experiencing, and if we can understand their pain, then we could find solutions that nobody else has really thought of. And I think the best marketing solutions almost always come from that side of things, like understanding the jobs to be done from the perspective of the customer. And you had mentioned something earlier, kind of leading up to that, and I didn't want to go too far down that road till we got to this point in the conversation. But speaking of the jobs to be done, it's not only to keep the food cold, but it's really to ensure that food is kept cold consistently and gets to the customer. That it gets that the food's delivered to the customer. McDonald's has somebody order a hamburger, that their hamburger is safe to eat essentially, like, and that they're able to get their food and they're able to eat it safely without having loss anywhere in the process. And that really expands the job to be done from just like keeping something cold to delivering healthy, safe to eat food without food loss. That's really ultimately more of the job to be done. And when you understand that, you can expand into new solutions that help to ensure those other pieces of the puzzle. And that really, again, goes beyond the commodity. Like keeping food cold is a commodity way to think, but delivering safe food without food loss or minimize food loss, that's actually a solution that the customer is ultimately buying.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with you. And just to add another element of same thinking, you're more outcome focused, and to ensure that the food is safe when it lands in the hands of your end customer is if that becomes your motivation, and if that is what you're trying to pursue, I think you would not just be in the component business. You would not be in component business for long. You'll come up with ideas and ways how you can upgrade, or how you can add more intelligence to your products, to add more, to offer more towards the outcome that you very well articulated, Joseph.
Yeah. So, what was the strategy that you ended up landing on and implementing in that cold chain application?
So one of the things that it was really obvious to me early on, that there are a lot of things that are done manually in a restaurant. And I was like, you know what? I love for the fact that someone is running around with a piece of paper, and, every 4 hours, he or she is entering the walk in and writing down the temperatures. And, they keep the records for 60 days just in case, something goes bad, or so on and so forth. But I was like, gosh, these people could be doing so much more in different areas. They could
Mm,
be helping in customer service or other things, because what was being done manually could be something that could have done by a technology. And what it would
mm,
do is, there are two ways of looking at it. A, you're freeing up resources to deploy them in areas which are probably more productive for you as an organization. And the other element is, you're also freeing up your mind space, and you're trying to eliminate any manual errors. or if
Yeah.
or any poor practices. So one of the things that came to my mind was, gosh, why not just automate this? And we already had a solution of sorts. So if you look at it, compressors is a component, and the controls that you use on top of the compressor, so to say, it's controls. It sounds a little more complex, but in the end it's also a component. But what we had done was we added an element of intelligence to it. And this is also another thing. A lot of people talk about IoT. They think that it is really sophisticated. I'm an engineer, but by no means do I claim that I'm an expert in technology. But in my working theory, it doesn't take a lot for you to add a modem with a cellular gateway for you to start getting data out of your components. So if somebody tells you that, oh, IoT is too complicated, it's not. Just look for the right people, look for the right hardware people, and you can, I can give you another example of an ice machine project that we've done. But getting back to this example, Joseph, what we've done was we automated this. So we had, I had a product called remote temperature monitoring, and what
Mm.
it did was it not only reported, the manual way of doing it was you get a temperature once in 4 hours, but this was consistent basis. It was round the clock, and there
Mm.
were parameters set. If the temperatures were, off range, it would send an alert to the manager, and more often than not, the manager would find that the walk-in door was not closed properly, or it would also give, intelligence or a sneak peek into the fact that, oh, there's something that needs to happen from a maintenance standpoint. But in a sense, what we did was we combined our components to come up with a solution.
Yeah, and I like what you're talking about there, where IoT or IIoT, depending on the
Correct.
application, it doesn't have to be extremely complex. And in fact, I was talking to a friend recently that works in the industrial manufacturing space, like they sell software, and to connect devices using IIoT, they they literally use a Raspberry Pi, like simple
True.
of an application as you can get, and they're using that to connect these devices to their software application, and it adds a lot of intelligence, and they do work orders and stuff like that. So they're able to add all of this information and even guide steps of the process just by adding, like you're saying, one simple component to the process can really give you all of that data and completely differentiate what you're offering.
And just to extend on that, so we had a nice machine, supply or a customer, and they wanted to run experiments in different parts of the world. They wanted to see, how their machines perform in Australia, how they perform in, different parts
Mm.
of, Africa, just different external environmental conditions. And all that we had to do was add the element of intelligence and, pull the information to the cloud and visually present the data to them. So every day an ice machine in Australia or an ice machine in South Africa would plug information, and people sitting in Denver could see how their ice machines were performing. And
Mm.
just imagine, if they did not have this opportunity, they probably would have never known how their product would perform in an Australia, and hence they would have never made the plunge to explore the Australian market, just because of all the other externalities that they could not control. So to say, it's a component, but upgraded with some data linkages that creates a new set of offering for your customers.
Yeah, so maybe you could speak a little bit to some of the benefits of doing going that route. So you add in the data. I know when we talked before about this specific McDonald's story, you were saying that that the process to get uh, essentially by the time the reporting would actually happen, a lot of times you had already lost the food at that point.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're helping to keep loss from happening, which is really valuable for McDonald's, not only for making sure they don't lose the cost of the goods, but then also that they're able to actually deliver their products to customers on time. they don't have any food shortages or anything like that. So at that point, you're kind of upgrading from a compressor to, again, like we're saying, that job to be done of delivering safe food to the customer consistently, where you don't have food shortages and you don't have food loss. So you're kind of moving again out of that commodity space. But then maybe you could speak a little bit to how that helps you connect your product to the end user and kind of what that means, what that does for you when you connect with the
Yeah,
end
yeah,
user.
absolutely. Once the beauty about elevating your profile within the end user is you get recognized for other opportunities that exist in their ecosystem. Once they realize that, hey, you're an engineering company which deeply cares about their problems, and if you've solved one of their biggest problem. And another element is, Joseph, food wastage is certainly one, but food safety is another one. So if the likes of McDonald's feel the confidence that their product has never been compromised, they can use that messaging in their branding, and
Mm,
that would really churn a lot of just invite more customers into their restaurants or to the drive-throughs. But going back to what has it done to us, it has given us opportunities to be in a room where we might have talked about things which otherwise would have never been we would have never been considered for. So other elements like, okay, they have some kind of a workplace management system. So is this something that you guys can help us with, because it is connected to different equipment, and they know that we play a role in the equipment. And then they also had troubles. This is really another good story. So nobody would believe that the impact of a broken ice machine in a restaurant, because the first thing that you ask is, oh, how much revenue does an ice machine make? You don't sell ice, so it
right.
doesn't make any revenues. But if your ice machine doesn't work, you can't sell your smoothies, you can't sell
Mm,
your sodas. And it's a big repercussion, and people don't think about it. And these are things that you only realize when you're a part of the ecosystem. So they wanted more guidance on how do we prevent ice machine breakdowns without having to have another ice machine in the backup.
I
So
see.
long story short, once you become an advocate for your customer and have solved problems, you're be prepared to get invited to a lot of conversations that could be game changing.
Yeah, it's almost, in marketing and sales especially, the goal should be that you get outside of being seen in the vendor category, and as a salesperson, you don't want to be seen as a salesperson, because that has a connotation with used used car sales and somebody that's trying to take advantage of you and somebody that's trying to just get a commission check out of you. Whereas if you can upgrade, kind of a similar conversation, similar mindset, but instead of for a commodity part, for the sales role, it kind of ends up being similar, and that's to be seen as a trusted advisor,
And a
where you're
partner.
going, yeah, as a partner versus like a vendor or a salesperson, and you're still doing the same function. You're still trying to increase revenue and hit quotas and all of that. But when the customer sees you as a trusted advisor because you've shown that you first care about them before you care about yourself, um, it opens up so many doors where they invite you into conversations ahead of time, and maybe don't shop around to other vendors at all in that case because they trust you. And it sounds like it's a similar thing that's happened for Emerson.
Yeah, it's very sticky, it's very loyal, and like you've said, it's a true partnership. So you're no longer vulnerable to somebody else swooping volumes from you, because you are truly dedicated to the needs of the customers. And it is just an honest relationship that both parties appreciate.
Yeah, and I want to, uh we could keep talking about this all day. This is pretty interesting. I think we could go a lot further, but we're kind of running out of time here. But one last thought on this is, not only does it help you to get specced into future projects, because if they know that you're providing this extra solution, they're going to request or require that your components are specified in, especially if they have a solution that's integrated then with your reporting, then they're going to want to have you because they've already, invested in the reporting and everything. So it helps you get specified in, but also then they can't just swap out your compressor with somebody else's part. Now, when they go to order a replacement part, it really has to be your part, or they're going to lose that element of reporting, which is, in the end of the day, maybe even more valuable, like we've talked about, than the compressor itself. So it adds an extra stream of revenue from the reporting side, and what you can charge for that as the solution. It guarantees that you get specified in to begin with, because they want that solution that nobody else is providing. But then to top it all off, they can't just swap out your part with somebody else's for repairs. So you're really it's like a win-win-win for you and for the customer at that point.
Absolutely, you've said it better than most people would ever, try to get to. So very well said. Yes.
Yeah. So just to kind of close off here, because you've provided some great insights, and what I love about talking with you is you're extremely smart and strategic, but you have a great way of getting practical. Even the example of you going to McDonald's and rolling up your sleeves and working in the kitchen as an engineer that's then gone into strategic consulting and marketing, then to be willing to go work and roll up your sleeves and work hard and care about the people that you're serving. That's amazing. And I love that. And being able to break this down and make it super practical, I feel like this conversation is already valuable in that way. But let's just cap it off by, what are some recommendations that you would have for industrial marketers at component manufacturing companies? If you could just leave them with one or two things.
So the top thing is, Joseph, I think we've emphasized, enough on this element, but customer advocacy. I think it is so important, even if you're in the world of, manufacturing, so to say, components. Try to find the time, spend 1 or 2 weeks, partnering, be on the manufacturing shop floors of your customers where your product goes in, and you learn so much because, even if you're thinking about, if you're a component provider, you would see which other components does your product interact with, and then you can come back with, so much more intelligence. And for all you know, these two components can be supplied by the same, manufacturer. So you could probably bring back some M&A opportunities for your employer, or if you're an entrepreneur, for yourself. So you have, more share of of the customer's wallet. So that's one element. So one thing, if there's one thing that I'd strongly recommend to all the viewers, readers, and listeners, find an opportunity to go, stand in the shoes of your customers. If not anything, you will earn so much more respect because they have seen you live their life. So it just elevates the relationship. And the other element is, don't just be a passionate customer advocate. Also be passionate about your own business and about your own business model. How good are your sales, how good, what's the quality of your margins, and always try to look at, a tipping scale and see how you're performing. And if there are some adjustments that you need to make, go ahead, do them. But just be conscious of both these things: how's your business performing, and be a strong customer advocate.
Man, excellent advice for anybody in, really pretty much any marketing space, but definitely in the industrial space. So yeah, again, Ravi, thank you so much. You're clearly adding a lot of value to the companies that you work at here. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Joseph. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.